poor boy surprises everyone by fixing an $800,000 agricultural machine all by himself. It all begins when his father is hospitalized, and he decides to ask for a job from the millionaire who owns the ranch. Initially dismissed, he silences everyone by accomplishing what no technician could. The feat goes viral, and the boy gains national fame, changing his life and that of his employer. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The sun rose relentlessly over the lands of Hope Ranch in rural Texas. While most workers had already started their day in the coffee fields, in the small wooden shack at the edge of the property, Jack, a 9-year-old boy, watched his mother try to hide the cough that had been consuming her for weeks. "Mom, did you take your medicine today?" he asked, placing a glass of water beside her. Claire forced a smile, but her sunken eyes and the paleness of her face revealed that the situation was worsening. "The medicine ran out, son. When your father returns from the hospital, he'll buy more." Jack lowered his eyes. He knew that was just his mother's way of trying to calm him. His father, Sam, had been hospitalized for 3 weeks, since he was seriously injured, trying to prevent a group from trespassing on the ranch lands. The broken ribs and internal injuries would keep him away from work for months, according to the doctors. "I'll get some fresh water," said the boy, quickly leaving so his mother wouldn't notice his tears. On the way to the well, Jack observed the movement at the ranch headquarters. There he was, Colonel Anthony Morgan, the property owner, known for his rigidity and aloofness. A man of few words and many possessions, he rarely spoke to common workers. People in the region said his heart had hardened since he lost his wife 10 years earlier. While filling the bucket, Jack overheard a conversation between 2 passing workers. "I think the new harvester is broken for good. The technician from town came yesterday and couldn't get it working. And now, if we can't harvest the coffee in time, many people won't get paid this month." Those words hit Jack like lightning. No payment meant his family would continue without money for his mother's medicine and hospital expenses. The roof of their house, which already leaked on rainy days, wouldn't survive another storm. Food, which was already scarce, would run out completely. It was at that moment, with his small hands gripping the well rope, that Jack made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone on that ranch. He left the full bucket beside the house, checked that his mother was sleeping, and taking a deep breath, walked determinedly toward the main mansion. He had never been so close to that place. The immaculate garden, the huge windows, and the spacious porch seemed to belong to another world, very distant from the reality of a ranch worker's son. "What do you want, boy?" Jeremy, the foreman's gruff voice made him freeze for a moment. "I need to speak with Colonel Anthony," he replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. The man laughed, looking him up and down. "And what would a kid like you have to say to the boss? It's important, please." Something in the determination of those childish eyes made the foreman hesitate. After a long sigh, he indicated that the boy should wait and entered the house. Minutes later, which seemed like hours to Jack, he returned. "You can go in, but be quick, the boss doesn't have time to waste." The office was spacious, with shelves full of books that Jack had never seen before. The smell of polished wood and freshly brewed coffee filled the room. Behind an imposing desk, Colonel Anthony observed him with an expression between curiosity and impatience. "So you're Sam's son," he said finally. "What do you want with me, boy?" Jack swallowed hard. "I want to work in my father's place, sir." The silence that followed was broken by the colonel's restrained laughter. "Work? You? And what could an 8-year-old boy do here?" "I'm 9, sir, and I can do any job. I'm strong and I learn fast." The colonel stood up, walking around the desk to better observe this extraordinary child. Jack felt the man's penetrating gaze, but maintained an upright posture, eyes fixed without showing the fear running through his veins. "Your father will be in the hospital for a good while, and your mother needs medicine. Without his salary, we don't have money for food or to pay the bills," continued the boy. "Please give me a chance. And what do you know how to do besides playing with toy cars and climbing trees?" "I know how to tend the garden. I help my father fix things at home, and I learn quickly, as I said." Anthony sat back down, thoughtful. There was something about this boy that intrigued him, a mixture of desperation and dignity uncommon in someone so young. "If I accept, the payment will be less than your father's. Much less, do you understand that?" "Anything is better than nothing, sir." The colonel scribbled something on a paper and handed it to the boy. "Report tomorrow at sunrise to the main barn. If you can't handle the work, don't come crying afterward." Jack took the paper with trembling hands, hardly believing what he had accomplished. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret it." "We'll see about that," replied the colonel, already turning his attention back to the documents on his desk in a clear sign of dismissal. Upon leaving the mansion, Jack felt the weight of responsibility fall on his small shoulders. How would he explain this to his mother? How would he handle work done by grown men? What if he failed? On the way back home, he passed by the barn where they kept the agricultural machinery. Through the half-open door, he saw the huge new harvester, stopped with several men around it, arguing heatedly. He moved a little closer, curious. "The technician from town has already come 3 times and nothing. If we don't fix this soon, we'll lose the harvest," one of the men was saying. Jack observed the machine for a few moments. His father always said that machines were like people. They had their quirks and their secrets. You just needed patience to discover them. When he arrived home, he found his mother sitting on the small porch, looking at the horizon with a distant air. "Where have you been, Jack? I was worried." The boy sat down beside her, gathering courage. "Mom, I got a job on the ranch." Claire's tired eyes widened. "A job? But you're just a child." "Colonel Anthony accepted me. I start tomorrow." Claire took her son's hands in hers, her eyes watering. "My son, you don't have to do this. We'll find a way." "It's already decided, Mom. Everything will be fine, you'll see." That night, Jack could hardly sleep. He thought about his sick mother, his hospitalized father, the work that awaited him, the broken machine in the barn. When sleep finally came, he dreamed of giant gears and coffee fields that extended to infinity. The first day of work was harder than he had imagined. The sun punished mercilessly, and his small hands were soon full of blisters from carrying bags of fertilizer. The other workers observed him with a mixture of pity and admiration, but few offered help. "Won't last a week," commented an older man, passing by him. Jack didn't respond. He continued his work in silence, ignoring the pain in his back and the fatigue that was already taking over his body. At the end of the day, when everyone was already preparing to leave, Foreman Jeremy approached. "The boss wants to see you in the machinery barn. Now." With aching legs, Jack followed the man to the large barn. Inside, Colonel Anthony was observing the harvester with a displeased expression. "Boy, you said you helped your father fix things. What do you think happened to this machine?" Jack felt all eyes on him. In the dimness of the barn, experienced men and Colonel Anthony himself awaited a response that seemed impossible for a 9-year-old boy. The harvester, imposing and modern, stood there, silent like a metal sphinx. "May I look closer, sir?" he asked timidly. The colonel made an impatient gesture but agreed. "3 technicians have already come here and solved nothing. What do you think you'll find?" Ignoring the disbelieving tone, Jack approached the machine with reverence. His father always said that machines talked, you just had to know how to listen. He walked around the equipment, carefully observing each detail, each connection, each hose. His eyes scanned the engine, the exposed gears, the cables. Then he crouched down to examine the lower part. "There," he suddenly pointed. "There's a hydraulic hose with a small leak. It's almost imperceptible, but the oil is slowly escaping." Foreman Jeremy approached, incredulous. "Where, boy?" Jack indicated a specific point where a hose had a tiny cut, so small that it would easily go unnoticed by less attentive or more hurried eyes. "And how do you suggest fixing this?" questioned the colonel, now genuinely interested. "If I could use a piece of sturdy rubber and some clamps, I could make a temporary repair until you get a new hose," Jack replied, remembering how his father fixed the community water pump when it had similar problems. There was a brief silence in the barn. Then, surprising everyone, the colonel ordered, "Give him what he needs." With skillful hands, despite his young age, Jack improvised tools and worked on the damaged hose. His small fingers reached places that adult hands would have difficulty with, and his attentive eyes didn't miss any detail. After almost an hour of meticulous work, he asked them to start the machine. The engine roared, hesitated for a few seconds, and then came fully to life. The harvester was working again, to everyone's astonishment. "Impossible," muttered one of the ranch technicians. "Simply impossible." Colonel Anthony observed everything with an enigmatic expression. Without saying a word, he gestured for Jeremy to follow him and left the barn. The other workers looked at Jack as if he were an apparition. "How did you know?" finally asked an older man named Tom, who had worked on the ranch for decades. Jack shrugged. "My dad taught me to pay attention to details. He says every machine tells its story if you know how to listen." That night, upon returning home, Jack found his mother more animated. A neighbor had brought soup and stayed with her during the day. "How was your first day?" asked Claire, caressing her son's hair. "It was good, Mom. I think the boss liked my work," he replied, omitting the fatigue and body aches. "Soon we'll have money for your medicine." The next morning, to his surprise, Jack wasn't assigned to work in the fields. Instead, the foreman took him back to the machinery barn. "The colonel wants you to take a look at all the equipment. Start with the small tractor, which is having ignition system problems." Thus began a new phase for Jack. His days were now divided between helping in the fields in the morning and working in the machinery barn in the afternoon. His knowledge, acquired by watching his father and learning by doing, proved surprisingly useful. Soon, workers from all sectors of the ranch were asking for his help with small repairs. A week later, the colonel appeared in the barn while Jack was adjusting an engine carburetor. "Jeremy tells me you've been fixing everything that comes your way," he commented, examining the boy's work. "I'm trying, sir," replied Jack without taking his eyes off the task. "Tomorrow I want you to go to the northern part of the ranch. We have a problem with the irrigation system there." The northern area was known to be the most rugged on the property. With the steep terrain and recent rains, the work would be especially difficult. Jack knew this, but only nodded. The following morning, under a cloudy sky that threatened rain, he set out with Tom for the indicated region. The irrigation system had completely stopped, putting an entire new coffee plantation at risk. "It's the main water pump," explained Tom. "If we don't fix this soon, we'll lose everything." Jack examined the equipment, trying to understand the problem. The rain began to fall, first lightly, then harder, turning the soil into slippery mud. As he worked, he felt the ground give way beneath his feet. He slid down the hillside, dragging some newly planted seedlings with him. "My God, boy, are you okay?" shouted Tom, carefully descending to help him. Jack stood up, covered in mud, but the worst wasn't the scratches on his body. The damaged plants represented a considerable loss. His heart tightened. It was exactly the kind of mistake that could cost him his job, and consequently, his family's survival. "The boss will be furious," muttered Tom, looking at the damage. That night, Jack couldn't eat. He told his mother what had happened, and she tried to console him, but the fear of having disappointed everyone was greater than any word of comfort. He left the house late at night and walked to a small stream that cut through the property. He sat on the bank, finally letting the tears come. "It's not easy, is it?" The voice startled Jack. It was Tom, who had apparently followed him. The old worker sat down beside him, lighting a cornhusk cigarette. "Everyone makes mistakes, boy. Even the colonel, with all his money and power, makes mistakes sometimes." "But what if he fires me? My mother needs the medicine, and my father—" "He won't fire you," interrupted Tom. "Do you know why? Because you did in a week what many grown men couldn't do in years. You have a gift, kid." "Gift? For machines, it's like they talk to you," smiled the old man. "Tomorrow you go back there, fix that pump, and everything will be fine. You'll see." Encouraged by Tom's words, Jack returned to the northern area the next morning. He worked more carefully, mindful of the treacherous terrain. After hours of attempts, he managed to identify the problem: a valve clogged by sediments brought by the rains. With patience and precision, he cleaned the entire system. When water began to flow again through the irrigation pipes, watering the thirsty plantations, Tom let out a joyful shout that echoed across the hillside. The other workers approached, observing with admiration the well-done job. News of the success quickly reached Colonel Anthony's ears. That afternoon, he appeared personally to inspect the work. "I heard you fixed the pump," he said, observing the system in full operation. "Yes, sir. It was just a clogged valve." "And the plants that were damaged yesterday?" Jack lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry about that, sir. I slipped in the mud." To his surprise, the colonel showed no irritation. "It happens. The important thing is that you saved the entire plantation. The loss would have been much greater if the irrigation hadn't started working again." That was the first time Jack saw something different in the boss's eyes. It wasn't exactly kindness, but perhaps the beginning of respect. In the days that followed, Jack's status on the ranch subtly changed. He was no longer just the son of the injured worker, or the boy trying to take his father's place. He was the machine boy, as some began to call him. He received a basic set of tools and his own space in the barn, where he could work on the equipment more comfortably. At home, the situation was also gradually improving. With the first payment, small but precious, Jack bought the medicine his mother so desperately needed. Claire, still weak but visibly more animated, observed her son with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're growing up too fast, my son," she said one night, as they were having dinner. "It's necessary, Mom," he replied with a maturity that didn't match his 9 years. "Soon, Dad will be back, and things will get even better." In the hospital, Sam was slowly recovering. When Jack managed to visit him, bringing good news about his work on the ranch, his father cried, with pride, with sadness at seeing his son taking on responsibilities so early, with hope for a better future. "You are strong, my son, stronger than I ever was," said Sam, squeezing the boy's hand. Meanwhile, on the ranch, something strange began to happen. Equipment that worked perfectly began to show inexplicable failures. One morning, Jack found the main tractor with cut wires, clearly an act of sabotage. "I don't understand," he commented to Tom. "Who would do such a thing?" The old worker looked around, making sure they were alone. "There are old rivalries in this region, boy. Colonel Anthony has powerful enemies, neighboring ranchers who have been disputing land and water for generations. But why sabotage the machines? It's a form of pressure. If production falls, the ranch loses value. It would be easier to force the colonel to sell the land." That revelation opened Jack's eyes to a more complex reality than he had imagined. The ranch wasn't just the place where he worked. It was the center of old disputes, of stories that began long before his birth. One day, while examining a newly repaired tractor, he noticed something shiny on the barn floor. Crouching down, he found a small metallic object, a pendant with the emblem of a neighboring ranch, Horizon Ranch. He thoughtfully put it in his pocket. That night, something woke Jack from his sleep. A distant but unmistakable sound, the sound of metal against metal coming from the direction of the main barn. Silently, he left the house and followed the sound, hiding in the shadows. With his heart racing, Jack cautiously approached the barn. The full moon illuminated the path, casting elongated shadows that danced with the night breeze. Through a gap in the door, he saw a figure moving among the machines. A tall man whom he had never seen before was tampering with the main harvester, the very one he had repaired weeks ago. The boy held his breath, carefully observing each movement. The intruder was opening the control panel and manipulating something inside it. There was no doubt. Sabotage was in progress. Jack knew he should call someone, but there wasn't time. In minutes, the damage would be done. In a burst of courage, he pushed the door forcefully, making it bang against the wall. "Stop that!" he shouted, with the firmest voice he could muster. The man turned, startled. For an instant, the two stared at each other, the unknown adult and the determined boy. Then, in a quick movement, the intruder jumped through a side window and disappeared into the darkness. Jack ran to the harvester, finding that the control panel had been damaged. Some wires were cut, and important parts had been displaced. "What's going on here?" Colonel Anthony's grave voice echoed through the barn. He appeared at the door, accompanied by Jeremy and 2 other employees. All were looking at Jack next to the open machine, tools scattered around. "I saw a man messing with the harvester, boss," explained Jack, still breathless. "He was sabotaging the equipment." "A man? Or was it you who was trying to damage the machine?" questioned Jeremy with suspicion in his voice. "No, I would never do that. I heard noises and came to see what it was. When I arrived, he escaped through the window." The colonel approached, examining the damaged panel. His face remained impassive, but his eyes revealed a disturbing intensity. "Could you fix this?" he finally asked. Jack examined the damage. "Yes, sir, but I'll need new parts for some components." "Jeremy, stay with the boy. You two come with me to check the surroundings," ordered the colonel, quickly leaving with the other men. Under the foreman's suspicious gaze, Jack worked for hours to reverse the damage. When the sun began to rise, the harvester was working again, although not perfectly. "I'll need to adjust it better when the new material arrives," he explained, wiping sweat from his forehead. Jeremy nodded, a little less hostile. "The boss wants to talk to you at the big house after breakfast." Jack's heart raced. Would he be fired? Accused of lying? With trembling legs, he headed to the main house after a quick breakfast. On the porch, he found the colonel seated, leafing through an old book. Come closer, Jack, he said, closing the book. We found footprints around the barn. Someone was there last night, and it wasn't one of our men. The boy breathed a sigh of relief. I told the truth, sir. I know that now. What I don't know is how you, a 9-year-old boy, had the courage to confront an adult intruder, potentially dangerous. Jack lowered his eyes. I didn't think about that at the time. I just saw that he was going to destroy the machine. An almost smile passed across the colonel's lips. You care about the machines more than most adults on this ranch. They're important. Without them, the work would be much harder for everyone. The colonel indicated a chair. Sit down, I want to show you something. Reluctantly, Jack obeyed. The colonel opened the book he had been reading, an album of old photographs. He pointed to a yellowed image, a boy of about 10 next to an elderly gentleman, both bent over the engine of an old car. This is me, explained the colonel, and this beside me is my grandfather, the founder of this ranch. He taught me everything about machines, long before I became the owner of these lands. Jack observed the photograph with curiosity. It was hard to imagine the severe Colonel Anthony as a smiling boy. I lost that interest over time. Business, responsibilities. They ended up occupying all the space. He closed the album with a sigh. Seeing you work on those machines reminded me of that time. It was the longest and most personal conversation the colonel had ever had with any ranch employee, let alone a child. Jack didn't know what to say. From today, you'll have access to better tools, continued the colonel, and I'll assign Tom to work directly with you. He knows this ranch like no one else. Thank you, sir, murmured Jack, still assimilating the change in the boss's attitude. As for your payment, it will be increased, not to your father's level yet, but enough to help more at home. That day, Jack returned home with a light heart. He told his mother about the raise, omitting the incident with the intruder so as not to worry her. Claire smiled, more rosy-cheeked than in recent days, thanks to the medicine she could now take regularly. Your father would be proud, she said, caressing her son's face. But don't forget that you're still a child, Jack. You need to play, rest. I like what I do, Mum. It doesn't feel like work when I'm fixing the machines. The following days brought more changes. A larger space was reserved for Jack in the barn, equipped with professional tools. Tom, now his official partner, shared stories of the ranch while they worked together, revealing details of the rivalry between Colonel Anthony and Robert Mitchell, owner of Horizon Ranch. It started with their fathers because of a land dispute, explained Tom, but it got worse when they both fell in love with the same woman, more than 20 years ago. The colonel's wife? Asked Jack, curious. Yes. She chose Anthony, and Robert never forgave him. When she died in childbirth, they say something broke inside the colonel. He became the closed-off man you know. The story made Jack look at his boss with different eyes. Behind the authoritarian figure was a man marked by loss and suffering, like himself, who had to grow up quickly in the face of difficulties. One morning, while organizing the tools, Jack found the small pendant with the Horizon Ranch emblem that he had kept. He showed it to Tom. Where did you find this? Asked the old man, alarmed. Here in the barn a few weeks ago. Tom examined the object carefully. This belongs to someone from the neighboring ranch. I need to show it to the boss. That afternoon, Colonel Anthony convened a meeting with his closest employees. The ranch's security would be reinforced, especially around the machinery barns and storage. The pendant was concrete evidence that people connected to Robert Mitchell were behind the sabotage. Why would he do this now? Asked Jack to Tom as they returned to work. I heard the colonel recently refused a purchase offer. Horizon Ranch wants to expand, and our lands are perfect for that. In the days that followed, Jack dedicated himself even more to his work. With the new tools and knowledge shared by Tom, he was able to perform increasingly complex repairs. The colonel frequently appeared in the barn, silently observing or asking questions about the equipment. During one of these visits, he brought a technical book about agricultural mechanics. This might help you better understand how the more modern machines work, he said, handing the volume to Jack. The boy was surprised by the gift. Thank you, sir. I'll study every page. At night after dinner, Jack would pore over the book, absorbing every detail, every illustration. Claire observed her son with a mixture of pride and concern. He was growing up too fast, taking on responsibilities that didn't belong to a child. I received news from the hospital today, she commented on one of those nights. "Your father is improving. The doctors say he might be able to come home in 2 weeks." Jack smiled, genuinely happy. "That's wonderful, Mom. I'll prepare everything for when he arrives." The prospect of Sam's return brought new energy to the boy. He worked with more dedication, eager to show his father everything he had learned and achieved during his absence. One afternoon, while performing maintenance on the irrigation system, Jack noticed something strange in the main pipes. A small crack, almost imperceptible, was beginning to form at a crucial point. If that ruptured, it would flood an entire area of the ranch, destroying the plantation and possibly causing a landslide. Without wasting time, he ran to the main house to alert the colonel. He found him in a tense meeting with Jeremy and other administrative staff. "Sorry to interrupt, sir, but it's urgent," Jack panted, standing at the door. The colonel frowned but indicated that he should enter. "What happened?" Jack quickly explained about the crack, using technical terms he had learned from the book. The men looked at him with expressions ranging from surprise to skepticism. "Are you sure about this, boy?" questioned one of the administrators. "A problem like this would require stopping all irrigation for days." "I'm sure, yes. And if it's not fixed soon, the damage will be much greater." Colonel Anthony stood up. "Show me." The entire team followed Jack to the indicated location. After a careful inspection, the specialists confirmed the crack was real and dangerous. If it hadn't been discovered in time, disaster would have been imminent. "How did you notice this?" asked the colonel, as the technicians were already initiating emergency procedures. "I realized the pressure was different. When I examined more closely, I saw the crack beginning to form." The colonel placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, an unprecedented gesture that surprised everyone. "You just saved this ranch from a huge loss, Jack." That night, something even more surprising happened. An elegant carriage stopped in front of the simple house where Jack lived with his mother. It was Colonel Anthony's car. He descended personally and knocked on the door. Claire answered, confused and a little frightened to see the boss there. "Did something happen to Jack, sir?" "No, ma'am. On the contrary. I came to personally thank you for the exceptional son you raised." Invited in, the colonel observed the simplicity of the house. The dirt floor, the leaking roof, the few pieces of furniture worn by time. His face, normally impassive, now betrayed an emotion difficult to name. "Jack saved my ranch today," he explained to Claire, "and it wasn't the first time. Since he started working for me, he has demonstrated extraordinary capability and dedication. He has always been a special boy," smiled Claire, looking fondly at her son. "Even so small, he already showed interest in everything his father did." "I came to make a proposal," continued the colonel. "I want to offer you a better house in the upper part of the ranch. It has 3 bedrooms, a complete bathroom, proper kitchen. It would be closer to work for Jack and more comfortable for you, especially with your husband's return." Claire and Jack looked at each other astonished. A better house meant the end of leaks, of cold coming through the cracks, of dampness that worsened everyone's health. "In addition," continued the colonel, "I want to ensure that your husband continues receiving his full salary until he is completely recovered and able to return to work." "But why?" asked Claire with watery eyes. "You never—" "Because your son made me remember something I had forgotten a long time ago," he interrupted, his voice slightly choked. "The value of compassion, dedication, honest work. And because it's time for me to start correcting some mistakes from the past." That night marked the beginning of a transformation. Not just in the life of Jack and his family, but in the very essence of Hope Ranch. Something was changing in the heart of Colonel Anthony Morgan, a man everyone judged incapable of deeper feelings. While helping his mother organize the few clothes and belongings for the move, Jack thought about everything that had happened since that day, when, desperate, he knocked on the big house door, asking for work. He never imagined that his childish courage would trigger such a revolution. The new house was a dream come true for Jack's family. Located on a small hill, it offered a privileged view of the coffee fields that extended to the horizon. The solid roof didn't let a single drop pass during rains. The wide windows brought light and fresh air to all rooms, and the spacious kitchen allowed Claire to return to preparing the dishes she loved so much, even though still weakened. On their first night there, sitting at the dinner table, a real table, not just improvised boards like they had before, Jack noticed the renewed gleam in his mother's eyes. "It feels like we're dreaming," said Claire, serving steaming soup. "I never imagined we would live in a place like this. The Colonel is different, Mum. He's been talking more, asking about you and about Dad. Claire nodded, thoughtful. People can change, son. Sometimes they just need a strong enough reason. And what would his reason be? Maybe you, Jack. Your courage, your determination. Sometimes a child can touch people's hearts in a way no adult could. Claire's words seemed to hold a grain of truth. In the days that followed, Colonel Anthony began making regular visits to the barn where Jack worked. It was no longer just to check on the progress of repairs, but to talk, to share stories of when he was young and learned mechanics from his grandfather. My grandfather used to say that each machine has a soul, he told him one afternoon while watching Jack adjust an engine, that we need to respect them, understand their moods. My father says something similar, smiled the boy, that they talk to us if we know how to listen. The Colonel nodded with a distant look. Your father is a wise man. How is his recovery going? Improving every day. The doctors say he can come home next week. Great, I'll be waiting for him. That phrase, spoken with genuine interest, was further evidence of the transformation taking place. Colonel Anthony, previously known for his coldness and detachment, was beginning to demonstrate a humanity that many deemed non-existent. But not everything was rosy. The sabotage continued, increasingly bold. One night, a small fire was started near the fuel depot, fortunately discovered in time by a watchman. On another occasion, they found sugar in a tractor's tank, completely damaging the engine. "It's Robert Mitchell," stated the Colonel during an emergency meeting with his closest employees, including Jack. "He's determined to harm me at any cost." "Why don't you talk to him, boss?" suggested Tom. "Maybe it's time to end this rivalry. I've tried years ago. He doesn't want to talk. He wants revenge." Jack listened to everything in silence, thinking about the stories Tom had told about the past of the two families, a dispute that started with the fathers, intensified with the sons, and now threatened the future of everyone who depended on Hope Ranch. On the day marked for Sam's return, Jack could hardly work, such was his anxiety. When the ranch car finally arrived, bringing his father, he ran to meet him with tears in his eyes. Sam was thinner, his face marked by the suffering of recent months, but his eyes shone upon seeing his son. He hugged him tightly, ignoring the pain he still felt in his ribs. "My son, my hero," he murmured, emotional. The family reunited again in the new house was the image of happiness. Claire prepared a special dinner, and Jack couldn't stop telling his father everything he had learned, all the machines he had fixed, all the responsibilities he had taken on. Sam listened with pride, but also with silent regret. His 9-year-old son had carried a weight that shouldn't have been his. He had grown up too quickly, forced by circumstances. "Tomorrow I'll talk to the Colonel," he said when they were finally alone. "Thank him for everything he did for you and say I'm ready to return to work." "Not yet, Dad," protested Jack. "The doctor said you need more time to recover completely." "I can't let my 9-year-old son support the family, Jack. That's not right. But I like what I do, and the Colonel has been good to us. He said he'll maintain your salary until you're fully recovered." Sam shook his head, incredulous. "Colonel Anthony said that? The same man who never visited a sick employee, who never showed concern for anyone besides himself?" "He's changed, Dad. Really." The next morning, despite Jack and Claire's protests, Sam went to the main house. He walked slowly, still feeling pain, but determined to regain his dignity, his position as the family provider. To his surprise, Colonel Anthony received him not in his formal office, but on the porch, like an expected and welcome visitor. "Sam, good to see you on your feet again," he greeted, indicating a chair. "Please sit down. Would you like some coffee?" Confused by the warm reception, Sam sat down. "Thank you, sir. I came to personally thank you for everything you did for my family during my absence, and to say that I'm ready to return to work." The Colonel observed him carefully. "You don't seem ready. You're still recovering. I can start with lighter tasks. It's not fair that my son continues working in my place." "Your son is extraordinary, Sam. A rare talent. He saved this ranch from enormous losses several times in recent months." Pride and gratitude mixed in Sam's chest. "He's always been clever. He's liked machines since he was little." "I have a proposal for you," said the Colonel after a moment of reflection. "When you're completely recovered, I want you to take over the supervision of the ranch's mechanical area, a new position with better pay, and your son will continue working with the machines, but only part-time. The rest of the day will be dedicated to studies. Sam blinked, astonished. Supervision? Me? You know this ranch better than most, and your son clearly inherited your knowledge and work ethic. It's a perfect combination. That conversation marked the beginning of a new era at Hope Ranch. Sam, once recovered, took on the position of supervisor, implementing significant improvements in mechanical processes. Jack, now with time to be a child again, divided his days between the work he loved so much and his studies, demonstrating the same dedication and brilliance in both. Colonel Anthony, for his part, continued his transformation. One morning, he surprised everyone by announcing the construction of a school within the ranch itself, to serve not only the children of employees, but all children in the region. Every child deserves quality education, he declared during the ceremony of laying the cornerstone, regardless of their origin or social condition. Claire, now completely recovered thanks to proper treatment, volunteered to help organize the school. Her kindness and patience made her perfect for dealing with the little ones. On a special Sunday, something happened that no one would ever expect. Colonel Anthony accepted Jack's invitation to visit the small community church, where the boy served as an altar boy. During the homily, the pastor spoke about the parable of the rich man and the kingdom of heaven, about how true wealth lies in loving one's neighbor. Something in those words deeply touched the colonel. At the moment of prayers, he stood up, walked to the altar, and to everyone's amazement knelt down. Silent tears ran down his face as the pastor placed his hands on his head in a special blessing. The community observed in respectful silence. Some cried, others smiled, witnessing what seemed to be a miracle. Colonel Anthony's heart of stone was finally turning into a heart of flesh. As they left the church, he approached Jack and his family. "I would like you to have lunch with me today. I have something important to share." At the bountiful table in the big house, the colonel revealed his plans for the ranch's future. A fairer management model, with profit sharing for employees, investment in education and health for all, sustainable cultivation practices. "I want Hope Ranch to be exactly that. A place of hope, of opportunities, of dignity for all who work here," he declared, with a conviction no one had ever seen before. Jack smiled, hardly believing the transformation that his simple childish courage had triggered. The seed planted on that desperate day, when he knocked on the door asking for work, was now germinating into a leafy tree that would shelter generations. The changes didn't go unnoticed beyond the ranch's boundaries. Robert Mitchell, the historical rival, observed with suspicion the new direction taken by his longtime enemy. The sabotage continued for some time, but gradually lost strength. It was difficult to maintain hatred against someone who was so visibly transforming. One day, during the inauguration of the ranch school, an unexpected visitor appeared. Robert Mitchell, accompanied by his youngest son, asked permission to participate in the ceremony. "I heard this school will accept children from all over the region," he said with evident discomfort. "My son would like to study here." Colonel Anthony hesitated for just a moment before extending his hand to his old rival. "He will be welcome, like all children." That handshake, witnessed by the entire community, symbolized the end of a rivalry that had caused so much suffering. It wasn't yet a friendship, but the beginning of a peaceful coexistence that would benefit everyone. Months later, Hope Ranch had become a model for the region. Representatives from other properties visited regularly, interested in learning about the shared management system, the sustainable cultivation techniques, the educational program. Jack, now 10 years old, continued dividing his time between studies and working with machines. He developed small innovations that facilitated the workers' daily lives: an alarm system to warn when irrigation needed maintenance, a device that reduced the effort needed to carry coffee bags. His story began to be told on local radio stations, in regional newspapers, in schools throughout the area. "The boy who transformed a ranch," they called him. But for Jack, the credit was never his. He had only done what was necessary, moved by love for his family and faith in a better future. On a golden autumn afternoon, as the entire ranch community gathered to celebrate the most abundant harvest in its history, Colonel Anthony climbed onto a small, improvised platform. Beside him stood Sam, Claire, and Jack. "We are here today not only to celebrate an exceptional crop," he began, his voice choked with emotion, "but to celebrate a much more valuable harvest, that of values such as courage, determination, faith, and love for one's neighbor." He looked at Jack, who smiled shyly. This boy, with his innocent courage and unwavering faith, taught me more about life and dignity than I learned in all my years. He fixed not only our machines, but also our hearts. Claire cried silently. Sam kept his arm around his son's shoulders. His chest swelled with pride. From today, continued the Colonel, I am establishing the Jack Oliver Educational Fund, which will guarantee complete scholarships for all children in this community, from basic education to university. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Jack looked at the Colonel with wide eyes, unable to believe what he was hearing. And more, I am legally transforming Hope Ranch into a cooperative, where all workers will also be owners, with fair participation in profits and decisions. The announcement prompted a wave of astonishment and joy. Men openly cried, women hugged each other. Children jumped without fully understanding what was happening, but infected by the general happiness. All this, concluded the Colonel, his voice now firm and decisive, because one day a 9-year-old boy reminded me that a man's true value lies not in what he possesses, but in what he is capable of giving. That night, during the party that followed, with music, dancing, and abundant food for all, Jack sat a little apart, observing the community's joy. The Colonel approached, sitting beside him. What are you thinking about, Jack? About how everything changed, sir. About how a small thing can make such a difference. The Colonel smiled, looking at the stars that were beginning to dot the sky. It wasn't a small thing, my young friend. It was an act of immense love, a boy willing to sacrifice his childhood for his family. That kind of love has the power to transform the world. Jack reflected on those words, feeling a deep peace. His family was safe. The community was flourishing. The future, once so uncertain, now shone with infinite possibilities. Shall we? Called the Colonel, standing up. Your mother made that cornbread everyone loves. Together they walked back to the party, where cheerful music mixed with laughter and animated conversations. Claire served a generous slice of cake to each, while Sam told, for the 1000th time, the story of how his 9-year-old son had saved the ranch's main harvester. And so, under the starry sky of rural Texas, Hope Ranch fully lived up to its name. A place where dreams germinated, grew, and bore abundant fruit. A place transformed by the courage of a child who, moved by love, dared to knock on the door of the most powerful and feared man in the region to ask for a chance. The end, listeners. We hope the story of Jack and the transformation of Hope Ranch has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions and reflections, we prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring stories about courage, faith, and overcoming obstacles. Find it right here, clicking to your left. If this narrative awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on this video. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of human transformations. Don't miss our upcoming content. We're eager to read your comments and know how this story resonated in your heart.